You know, sometimes life has a way of placing a woman in a space where it feels like the world has gone silent. The phone doesn't ring, the invitations stop, the people she once trusted become strangers, or worse, memories. And suddenly, she's alone. No friends, no circle, no shoulders. And the first thought that creeps in is, what did I do wrong? That's how the mind works. It connects isolation with inadequacy. But I want to tell you today, loneliness is not a curse. It's not a punishment. In fact, for many, it is a sacred call to self-discovery. You see, when everyone around you disappears, it might not be rejection, it might be redirection. We live in a world that glorifies busyness, noise, and social proof. You're validated when you're seen. You're admired when you're surrounded. You're celebrated when you belong to a tribe. But that very system can deceive the heart. It teaches us to depend on external voices to define our internal worth. So when those voices fall silent, we panic. But maybe that silence is the mercy of God. Because some truths, my brothers and sisters, can only be heard in silence. Some growth can only happen in solitude. And some transformations only begin when the noise dies down and you are left with no one but yourself and your Creator. That's not a curse, that's a calling. A woman with no friends is not necessarily a woman who has failed. She may very well be a woman who has outgrown the superficial, outgrown small talk, shallow loyalty, and temporary validation. And sometimes the universe, by Allah's command, clears the room so you can finally hear the conversation happening in your soul. That voice you've ignored, that wound you've suppressed, that purpose you've postponed. Loneliness becomes the mirror that shows you who you are beneath the masks you wore to be accepted. It's painful, yes. No one denies that. Even the Prophet Muhammad felt the weight of being alone in the cave, receiving revelation. Alone in Taif, rejected and stoned. Alone in moments when the world turned against him. But through those moments, he became the most complete human being to ever walk the earth. Why? Because solitude forced him to rely not on people, but on purpose. Not on comfort, but on conviction. Likewise, a woman who finds herself with no friends must not rush to fill that silence with anyone who comes along. Sometimes desperation can lead us into dangerous company. You see, when you don't know your worth, you will tolerate treatment that insults your soul. And that's why solitude is sometimes a gift. It teaches you your value. It gives you a chance to build a relationship with yourself that isn't dependent on others' opinions. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. The world will make you feel like something is wrong with you if you're alone. Society doesn't value inwardness, but God does. The same God who made the moon glow in isolation and the stars shine alone in the vast sky, He knows how to beautify solitude. So why doubt Him when He pulls you away from the crowd? Maybe He's preparing you in private for something powerful in public. Maybe He's protecting you from relationships that would have derailed your destiny. Maybe He's teaching you to stand so firmly on your own 2 feet that no storm can shake you again. The woman who walks through the fire of loneliness and emerges whole, she is not weak. She is not invisible. She is not abandoned. She is refined. She is elevated. She is spiritually awake. And let me say something important here. Being alone doesn't mean being lonely. There's a difference. Loneliness is a state of pain. Aloneness can be a state of peace. The first is emptiness. The second is wholeness. That's why the journey begins with mindset. You either see this season as a punishment or you see it as preparation. The woman with no friends is not to be pitied. She is to be respected. Because while others are distracted by shallow connections, she's facing herself. While others are posting for approval, she's healing in private. While others are chasing people, she's finding God. So if you are that woman, or you know that woman, Don't rush to change her story. Don't fill the void with noise. Let her grow. Let her breathe. Let her rise. Because when she returns from this wilderness, she won't return the same. And I say this with all sincerity. Sometimes God isolates you not because He's distant, but because He's near. He wants your undivided attention. And sometimes the only way to give Him that is to strip away the distractions. Friends may leave, but your soul remains. And if you listen closely, it will guide you home. So don't fear the silence. Embrace it. Because what feels like emptiness today may just be the womb of your greatest rebirth. It's often said that it's better to be alone than in bad company. But we don't fully understand how deep that truth goes until we've been wounded. Not by enemies, but by those we once called friends. A woman with no friends is sometimes seen as someone unfortunate, someone to pity. But I'd argue the opposite. She might in fact be someone incredibly protected, because having no friends can be far less painful than having the wrong one. Let's be honest. Not every smiling face is sincere. Not every friend who checks in wants to see you win. Some people are drawn to your light not because they admire it, but because they want to dim it. And sometimes God in His wisdom will remove them from your life, not to hurt you, but to heal you. Not to isolate you, but to insulate you from harm that you can't yet see. You see, betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from those you once trusted with your secrets, your heart, your dreams. And the damage that kind of betrayal does is deeper than most people realize. It makes a woman question herself, her judgment, her worth, even her identity. That's the hidden cost of the wrong friendships. It's not just the time you lose. It's the emotional confusion, the spiritual disorientation, and the trust that gets shattered. So when Allah takes people out of your life, especially those who don't deserve access to your soul, don't beg for them to stay. Don't cry over closed doors. Because sometimes their presence is delaying your growth. Sometimes their energy is contaminating your peace. Sometimes they're not even bad people. They're just not meant to walk with you into the next chapter of your life. There are friends who inspire you, and there are friends who exhaust you. Friends who remind you of God, and those who make you forget Him. A woman with no friends might just be someone who has walked away from environments that drained her spiritually and emotionally. And that is strength. That is clarity. That is tawakkul. Trusting in the wisdom of the Almighty, even when the world says otherwise. In fact, some friendships are based on your dysfunction, not your growth. People stay close to you when you're broken because your wounds don't threaten them. But the moment you start healing, the moment you start walking in your purpose and protecting your peace, they get uncomfortable. Why? Because your growth exposes their stagnation. Your self-respect challenges their manipulation. And suddenly, you're too much, or too distant, or you've changed. Yes, you have changed. And you should, because not every hand you held was helping you. Some were just holding you back. That's why I say, beware of sentimental loyalty. Don't stay attached to someone just because of how long you've known them. Time is not the best measure of a friend. Character is. And when someone consistently violates your peace, disrespects your values, or competes with your joy, it is a form of emotional erosion. You lose little pieces of yourself every time you allow it. But when you choose to walk away from that, even if it means walking alone, you reclaim your dignity. The Prophet Muhammad once said, "A person is upon the religion of his close friend, so let one of you look at whom he befriends." It's not just about having company. It's about the kind of company. Your inner circle either elevates you or empties you. They either water your faith or they poison your intentions. So, if you're a woman with no friends, don't assume that means something is wrong with you. It could mean that you've reached a level where you no longer tolerate the bare minimum. You've grown past gossip, drama, fake support, and energy that feels heavy. And that's something to be proud of, not ashamed of. But of course, we are social beings. We long for connection. That's natural. Islam doesn't call us to isolation. It calls us to intentional relationships, those based on sincerity, trust, and reminders of Allah. So if your friend circle is empty right now, ask him to fill it with people who love you for His sake, people who correct you privately, support you openly, and want for you what they want for themselves. Until then, let your solitude protect you. In the silence of that space, you'll find strength. In the absence of those who didn't truly care, you'll learn to care for yourself. And in the loneliness, you'll draw closer to the one who never leaves. So if life has removed people from your path, don't chase them. Don't grieve over what was. Trust that what's being kept from you is never better than what's being prepared for you. Sometimes God clears the room not to punish you, but to make room for something greater. It's because the absence of the wrong people is often the beginning of the right peace. There's a point in every sincere believer's life when things begin to fall apart. Not in a loud, obvious way, but quietly. A slow drifting. Friends fade. Invitations stop. You find yourself sitting alone more often. And naturally, you begin to wonder, why me? That's the human reaction. We interpret rejection as failure. But let me suggest to you something deeper, something spiritual. What if rejection isn't a sign of abandonment, but a form of divine redirection? A woman with no friends might feel overlooked, forgotten, unwanted. But what if she's being redirected away from the distractions of this world and toward a stronger, purer connection with her Creator? What if the silence surrounding her is Allah's way of clearing the stage for something far more profound, intimacy with Him? You see, when the heart is full of noise, it's hard to hear guidance. When our lives are cluttered with shallow interactions, constant validation, and social dependency, we become deaf to the whispers of our soul. But when that noise dies down, when the social world falls quiet, that's when the voice of your fitra, your inner truth, begins to speak. And it often says what we've been avoiding. Return. Rejection hurts. We don't deny that. But pain is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is a portal, an opening into a deeper layer of yourself and of your relationship with Allah. And that's why when people walk away or when friendships dissolve without warning, the believer does not despair. She reflects. She understands that what is removed is not as important as what is being revealed. And what is being revealed in that space of isolation is you, the raw you, the you who is not hiding behind roles or relationships, the you who remembers how to pray with sincerity, not just habit, the you who speaks to Allah not because it's time for salah, but because the heart aches to speak to the only one who truly understands. That's what redirection does. It brings you back to truth, back to purpose, back to the reason you were created. When the people who used to lift you up are no longer there, you realize that your strength was never in them. It was in the one who sent them into your life. And now that they are gone, He's teaching you that your foundation needs to be Him alone. It's not that friendships are bad. No, companionship is a gift in Islam. But when it becomes your lifeline, when your emotional stability is dependent on human approval, that's when it becomes dangerous. That's when Allah, in His mercy, intervenes. He removes the pillars you were leaning on, not to harm you, but to remind you of the only pillar that never collapses. And here's what's truly beautiful. Many women rediscover their faith in these exact moments of solitude. Their du'as become more authentic, their salam more focused, their hearts softer. Why? Because the absence of people forced them to find presence with Allah. Rejection redirected them to the one who never rejects. Sometimes the greatest mercy is being left alone, so you can return to the one who never leaves. But the world will tell you the opposite. It will say, you're alone, that must mean something's wrong with you. It will push you to chase attention, to fill the void with shallow connections, to numb the ache with noise. But Islam calls us to a different kind of healing. Not distraction, but direction. Not escapism, but elevation. When you are redirected by God, things begin to shift inside. You stop craving empty validation. You become more selective with your time. You start seeing through masks. And suddenly the same woman who once begged for belonging now walks in peace, knowing that Allah's love is sufficient. She doesn't carry bitterness, she carries clarity. Because she's not running anymore, she's rooted. So to the woman who finds herself alone, not because she pushed people away, but because life quietly pulled them back. Don't view your situation as a downfall. It may just be your turning point, your awakening, your redirection. God sees what you cannot. He knows what you don't, the people you miss, the places you long for, the comfort you once had. If it is not in your life right now, it's because it's not part of the route He's taking you on. And the destination He's preparing you for requires a version of you that hasn't fully emerged yet. That version is being sculpted in the silence, in the solitude, in the stillness. So don't rush this process. Don't resent the rejection. Embrace the redirection. Because sometimes, in the absence of friends, you rediscover the presence of faith. And that rediscovery will carry you in ways that no social circle ever could. Because when God closes one door, He doesn't just open another. He often opens your eyes. Sometimes a woman with no friends isn't isolated because of what she lacks, but because of what she carries. It's not always loneliness, it's protection. Not exclusion, but elevation. What do I mean? I mean that certain souls are carved for a deeper purpose. They carry light, integrity, purity, or resilience that makes them fundamentally different in a world that often celebrates the opposite. And when you are different in this way, when your soul vibrates at a higher frequency, it becomes hard for others to understand you, let alone walk with you. Have you ever seen someone who's too sincere for a room full of masks? Too honest for circles that thrive on flattery? Too focused to waste time in gossip? That woman is often misunderstood. She's called cold, distant, boring, or arrogant. But in reality, she's just guarded. Not because she lacks love, but because she values it too deeply to give it cheaply. When your character is built on sincerity, not showmanship, and your heart is aligned with values, not popularity, people will begin to drift. Not because of your flaws, but because of your depth. And not everyone can swim in deep water. You see, we live in a time where emptiness is celebrated if it's well packaged. Image is everything. Meaning is optional. And when a woman refuses to play that game, she's labeled. She becomes the outsider. Not because she did something wrong, but because her presence exposes what others are trying to hide. Her integrity becomes a mirror, and people don't always like what they see. Let me be clear. Being misunderstood is not a failure. It is often a confirmation that you are walking a path less traveled. Even the prophets were misunderstood. Even the most righteous were cast aside by their own communities. Why? Because the truth always unsettles what is false. When your values challenge the comfort zones of others, they will resist you. But their rejection doesn't define your worth. It reveals your weight. And here's what happens. When people can't categorize you, they distance themselves from you. You're not loud enough for the extroverts, not submissive enough for the manipulators, not careless enough for the reckless, and not desperate enough for the insecure. So they say, she's difficult. No, she's different. And that difference, if guarded with humility, is not a burden, it's a gift. But we often confuse solitude with shame. We think, if I was more lovable, more agreeable, more social, I wouldn't be alone. But love rooted in compromise is in love, it's performance. And any friendship that requires you to shrink to fit is too small for your destiny. Allah in His mercy often separates you before He elevates you. He sets you apart not to isolate you, but to refine you. Because if you're too busy pleasing the world, you'll never step into the fullness of who He created you to be. The woman who is always surrounded may never learn who she is when the crowd falls silent. But the woman who walks alone learns something sacred. Her value does not fluctuate with company. That's why I always say, be okay with being misunderstood. Not everyone has the capacity to see you for who you are. Some only see you through the lens of their own insecurity, jealousy, or shallowness. And that's okay. Their blindness does not erase your beauty. Their absence does not erase your presence. Si par calamari, non no, no sarte, no te ye. Si par no te. Don't lose yourself trying to convince others of your sincerity. Let your actions speak. Let your peace speak. Let your growth speak. And when people walk away because you refused to play small, let them. Some doors close, not to trap you, but to redirect you to something greater. The truth is, being misunderstood is often the price of authenticity. And in a world full of copies, choosing to be real is a revolutionary act. You may not be liked, you may not be invited, but you will be aligned with your values, with your faith, and with your purpose. Remember, the woman with no friends is not always friendless. She might just be too rare to be understood by many. And if you are that woman, walk on. Keep your heart soft, but your boundaries strong. Be kind, but don't shrink. Be humble, but don't apologize for your depth. The world may not celebrate you, but your Creator sees you. And His recognition is worth more than all the applause you'll ever get. Because when the world misunderstands your silence, your strength, your standards, God sees the truth. And that truth is enough to walk with peace, even if you walk alone.